I now call upon the clerk of this court to read the first charge in your handout. The first charge, please. And yes, that's it.
First charge reads as following: the state of the Netherlands is charged with committing crimes under Section 3 of the Intergenerational Climate Crimes Act on the basis of 3 complainants filed before this court. The complainants, comrades past, present, and future in Bolivia, have made the following allegations against the state of the Netherlands. First, that the state of the Netherlands abused its authority to make laws for the benefit of human and non-human inhabitants of the Netherlands by using those powers to recognize corporations as legal persons, issuing malicious fiats that such artificial legal persons are endowed with human attributes, and enabling, aiding, and abetting such artificial legal persons to impersonate natural Dutch persons. Second, that the state of the Netherlands used the artificial legal persons established and recognized by it to violate the sovereignty of weakened states and communities around the world and to expropriate lands, waters, forests, labors around the world with the aims of profiting from revenues, taxes, goods, commodities, and other direct and indirect benefits accruing from the expropriation. Third, that the state of the Netherlands created bilateral investment treaty as the legal framework for the benefit of corporations in the Netherlands, Europe, and around the world to enable artificial legal persons to expropriate land, water, forests, labors from humans and non-humans around the world. Fourth, that pursuant to the framework, the state of the Netherlands signed a bilateral investment treaty with Bolivia in 1992, fraudulently representing the state of Bolivia to the state of Bolivia that the treaty would bring benefits to the humans and non-humans living in the Cochabamba region of Bolivia. And 5, that the state of the Netherlands was aware that an American artificial legal person named Bechtel Corporation had expropriated the water sources and supplies, depriving the humans and non-humans of Cochabamba region of drinking water, and that it knowingly allowed the American national Bechtel Corporation to migrate to the Netherlands under the cover of the bilateral investment treaty to help the legal person to escape responsibility to Bolivia and the human and non-human residents of Cochabamba.
Thank you very much. I will now call upon the witness, Marcela Olivera, to present her evidence on behalf of the people and comrades past, present, and future of Bolivia, and on behalf of the organization Blue Planet Project in Bolivia. This witness will be sharing evidentiary material in the form of slides during her testimony. Marcela Olivera, your evidence, please.
Good afternoon and good morning for us here in the south of the world. I want to thank all of you for giving me a voice because our voice was silenced when this happened almost 20 years ago. I want to start remembering or telling the story a little bit about how this started. Can we pass to the next slide, please? Remembering what happened in 2000. Then some background about what happened afterwards, because many people knows the first part of our struggle for water in Bolivia, but not so many know that there was a second battle for water. So we're gonna go over a little bit more in detail. Some of the things that I put it on the slides were already presented in a, I guess, more articulated way earlier this morning. Anyway, we're gonna be going over that. So can we pass to the next slide, please? In September 1999 in Bolivia, there was a concession of our municipal water system. It was signed under a contract and a celebration on that time. In 1999, our president was Hugo Banzer Suarez. He was a former dictator, and he was trying to pass to the story, to the history as a Democrat. So he's one of the people that we see on the picture. Then it's the mayor on that time that it's still our mayor today, because it seems like sometimes we don't have memory and we go back to the same people. And then the ministers on that time. When this concession was signed, our president on that time said, "I am used to hear that kind of music when he heard people protesting outside of the city hall." Next, please. And then on something that we knew it was going to happen, there was a lot of resistance to this concession of the water system. We are the third largest city. On that time, we were the third largest city in Bolivia. But this concession didn't come alone. It came also with a legislation of water. And this legislation basically said many things, but basically one of the things that said is that all the water from wells, from native land, or that were on that time managed by organized communities, suddenly didn't belong to them anymore, and it belonged to the state, and the state will have to give concession over water. So there were two aspects here. First, the concession of our municipal water system, but also this law or legal framework that created or opened the possibility for commodify the water. So in January in 2000, there were the first mobilizations against both things, with blockades in the city and around the city and the highways, but also with protests in the streets. Next slide, please. In February, these protests were more violent. The government brought police from other parts of the country, and for 2 days we had a battle on the streets of Cochabamba. That we on the 5th of February, the government didn't think that was going to happen. Was forced to sign an agreement with the people, and that agreement said that they were going to review this legislation, that they were going to um, froze the water bills, because as soon as this private consortium took over our water systems, our water system, the bills rose up in some cases to 100%. So with this agreement, the government said, okay, that increase is not gonna happen. We're gonna review the legislation, and commissions were created from the side of the government, and also on the side of the people, to go over those things. Next, please. But nothing was really, it was just a strategy from the government, because nothing really happened. They were just trying to buy some time. And on April, it happened for over a week. There were even bigger protests in the city. You can see on the pictures, many people mobilized on that time. We call this the last battle, La Batalla Final in Spanish. And this was very violent this time. The government declared state of siege. And after many wounded people on the streets, even some deaths, the government finally canceled the contract with this consortium. Next, please. So this consortium that took over our water system was called Aguas del Tunari, or Tunari Waters, and we will see in detail how it was made of. Next, please. So what was for us Aguas del Tunari? It was very hard to find all this information because it was all secret, and nothing was. The government was very was holding these things very tight, and it was very, very hard for people to gather the information. But we discovered that Aguas del Tunari actually was this big company in the United States called Bechtel, and then it was Edison in Italy, and they created this shelter called International Water Holding that was registered in Holland. I guess they opened a they had an PO box there, but then they had also a bank account at ING. And then there were these other smaller shareholders like Abengoa in Spain that still works with water issues. And then there were some Bolivian elite also that hold the 20%. Anyway, this was the composition of this consortium, but we didn't stay with this information, and we tried to look more closely into who they were. So next, please. So we discovered that Bechtel on that time, and the name was not very familiar for us, was also a big economic power. It was a family business. They were in many, many, many industries. It was huge. Next, please. They had ties with former presidents. They had many of the executives were former or were working for the government in the past. Next, please. Some of them were officials, as I said before. Many of them were working on energy issues too. Next, please. And this is a phrase that always stayed with us. When these guys come into our countries to take over a basic service like water, they talk in these terms there. They do not come to provide a service for us. They come here, they come to our countries to make money. Next, please. So after Bechtel left in 2000, they came back in 2001 and they sue our government. The information that we had on that time, it was that they were suing us for $25 million in compensation for the cancellation of the contract. But later we found out through a spokesperson from the government that it was actually $50 million. It wasn't just $25 million. So you can have an idea that how these corporations and allied in alliance with our governments also do not give all the information to the people. Next, please. So which right they were asking for this money? And it's as somebody talked before earlier in the morning, it's under those free trade agreements that are trying to protect foreign investments. Next, please. So the mother of all of these protections is the World Trade Organization that does all these things. I don't think I need to go over each one of them. I think we all are very familiar with how these international organizations work. Next, please. how they also come, um, how they, what are their strategies, what are their tools. Next, please. And one thing that really shocked to us on that time is that they were not, when Bechtel was suing Bolivia, they were not um, suing us for what they invest here, because they stay so little. You know, they were just few months here, and what they invested was so little that so they were suing us for the loss of future profits, which it was, we couldn't believe that some legislation even existed related to this. How can somebody sue people for something that they were projecting to earn? That's something that is still today, you know, it strikes us very hard. How can people create legal frameworks that work that way, right? Next, please. So this, again, I won't go too much in detail on this. This morning was very illustrative in a way. Those things are, you know, where there are some names that have come the whole morning and all the time, like the World Bank, the CICC, and the IMF. So these are also some things that these international institutions do in our countries. You know, they tell us how to regulate things. They create these legal frameworks, and they, you know, make us sign or make our government sign these treaties. Next, please. So this is, you know, a comparison that we did on that time. We're talking about 2001, about how big Bechtel was and how big Bolivia was in relationship to them. You can see that they practically double size our economy. And so $25 million for us was really nothing. Next, please. So that's the numbers for Bechtel. It's what they probably, $25 million. It was probably something that they earned on a half day. But for us, it was 3,000, this salary for 3,000 doctors for a year, 1,200 teachers, and also 125 new water connections that could have been created in Cochabamba. Next, please. So who were the actors on that time? For us, this is very clear. The demand was $25 million under what instrument? Those bilateral investment treaties, one that we signed it with Holland in 1992. And who were involved? Bechtel, who was protecting the government of Holland, who was the defendant, the government of Bolivia, and where this was going to be decided, and it was the World Bank and the ICSID. And the World Bank, the same institution that pushed for water privatization in Bolivia, was going to be deciding this case in one of these secret courts called ICSID. And who were left out of this? Us, the Bolivian people. Next, please. So this is a little bit more in detail who was going to pay for this sue, and it was going to be really us. The ones that didn't sign anything, we were going to pay for this sue. Next, please. So what did we do? As I told you before, the first part of this battle for water was very well known in the world, but nobody was really paying attention to what was going on after 2000. So we started a campaign, a local campaign, but also international campaign, and all these slides are related to that campaign on that time. We clearly identify who is who here, and who were they, who we were, and what did we want. Next, please. So on this campaign, we demanded many things. First, we said we were not going to pay even $1 to Bechtel, and we were demanding from the Dutch government to not protect Bechtel because they were not even a company, a Dutch company. It was a U.S., mainly a U.S. corporation. We also demanded the World Bank and their court participation on that court, because on that time we learned that only 3 people were going to decide our case there, and how that's possible. Only 3 people deciding um, the fate of almost 10 million people in Bolivia. We sent several letters to the World Bank demanding them to hear us, demanding them to come to Bolivia and hear firsthand from the people what the privatization meant to us and what the company did to us and what our government did to us. And we ask from the Bolivian government transparency and to take a position of self-defense, because they were ready to sign a settlement and give all that money to this corporation. Next, please. When we saw that this was not working, that they were not even responding to us, we said, okay, so if those legal and rulers of the world are not responding as, we're gonna do it like we did it before. We are gonna do it on the streets. And we started a campaign that lasted several years. We went in Washington to the house of the president of the consortium at that time, and we started to give flyers to his neighborhoods, to his neighbors. We started to tell them who was living in the house. We had the same respond in places that we were seriously didn't know that they were acting in solidarity to us. Next, please. In San Francisco, that was the headquarters of Bechtel. We had all the time marches and mobilizations from people there, which it was very, I think, very important because it was their home. Next, please. And other, I guess, for us, very key place was where the mobilizations that were made in Holland, that also had an impact on the case. I want to say that if we wouldn't have had that type of solidarity, and as I said, this was a battle that lasted several years, we probably wouldn't have said in 2006 that our government finally settled for this sue, and they settled for 30 cents the share, which made a total of $400 to be paid to the corporation, which it was for us was a victory. We said not even a penny, but we only had to pay for $100, which was the cost of probably a used card, a secondhand card on that time here in Bolivia. And that's what the corporation got. And they didn't want to fight anymore with us. They didn't want to create more noise on that because they were completely scared and they were afraid of all the bad publicity that this case created. And for us, again, this was very important because we couldn't win in the on the on the on the on the on the right way, right? We couldn't win on the courts that they created, but we won again this battle, this other battle on the streets again. It was thanks to the organized people, thanks to the solidarity of people abroad and mobilized people here in Bolivia that we could win this case. I want to finish, if we go to the next slide. I will finish, I would like to finish my presentation reading a phrase that we put out on January and during the mobilizations in January that I think they resume our battle there. The statement says, the Bolivian government will rather respond to the directives of the World Bank than take into account what the people themselves consider to be their needs. The heart of the problem is this: who decides about the present and the future of the people, resources, work, and living conditions? We, in relationship to water, want to decide for ourselves. This is what we call democracy. Thank you very much.
The judges, Sharon Ben, Rasigan Maharaj, Nicholas Heldia, do you have any questions for Marcela Olivera?
I have some questions, but first I'd like to thank you for that very clear and very moving testimony. My questions are pertains to this case, but it's one that's generic actually to all the cases that we seem to be hearing. From your presentation, it was very clear that the people on the street were humans. I mean, they were clearly people, they bled, they had, you could see emotion in their eyes and so on. Now, it's my understanding that Bechtel also claims to have legal personality. And I'd like to hear from you what it is that is, what does that notion that Bechtel is somehow a person, first of all, what do you make of it? And secondly, what rights do they claim on the basis of claiming this personality? And thirdly, would they ever have been able to achieve what they did achieve if they didn't have that legal personality? I mean, as far as I know, Bechtel doesn't bleed when you cut it. You can't cut it. It's not born of a woman. It's not born through or conceived through a sexual act. It doesn't seem to me to have human personality at all. So what is this notion of legal personality? I'd like to get your perspective on that.
Thank you. Yes, these corporations that are the states were dominant on the past in the history of humanity at some point. But on these times, the corporations are the dominant institutions, have taken have taken over, have used a crack on the system in order to claim those rights. And that's something that is scary. And I think in response to that, also some activists and some organized groups have claimed that that nature has rights too. In fact, the constitution, the national constitutions of Bolivia and Ecuador talk about this in a very clear way. So for me, also the question is as the corporations claim to have rights, can we also claim that nature has rights? I don't know the answer, but I also wonder about this. Can we, and who is in charge to protect these rights that the corporations have, and these rights that nature may have? To whom we're giving power to do that? So these are questions that we came off all this time, and I don't think we have clear answers to that. But it's scary to see how things that were meant to do good on the system, like this rights framework, suddenly we can see that they have been used or are being used for other purposes. And I think that's how we have to be very aware of that, and have to pay more attention to what we are creating, and how that those things that we are creating are being used against us. I don't know if I have answered your question, but
Do you have a question?
So thank you as well, Marcela. Very clear and coherent presentation. In your response to Nick's question, you mentioned you recognize that the corporation was exploiting a crack in the system. Can I ask, in terms of the huge mobilization you spoke about, what is the Bolivarian sense of what constitutes that system?
you mean, can you repeat the Bolivarian? You're talking about that?
What do the people of Bolivia believe to be the system that allows these actions by corporations such as Bechtel?
I will say that our country, since it has a lot of majority of indigenous people in ancestral and traditional ways of doing things, we have been, it's very hard to explain this because it's very hard. It has been very hard for me to explain this to people in the north, and sometimes you have to be living here in order to understand. But we do not. This system was created for us, and only when it gets into conflict with traditional ways of doing things is when these clashes come up. We do have something that we called self-management here, and it's something that has been traditionally applied or made of by the people. But over that self-management, that is so different from one place to another, from one culture to another here, they have put us up on us this other system. And these things come up all the time because this other framework was not created by us, it was created for us, and we all are obligated to live on this under this system that we didn't really take part of. And what happened in 2000 in Bolivia, it was actually that. It was, people rose up because we said we don't believe on that. We don't believe on the democracy that you have created for us. For us, that's not democracy. And we're gonna do it our own way. And I think that's what has happened on that time. We fought not for, and this is a discussion that I have all the time with some people that we're part now of a larger movement that talks about the right to water. So were we fighting for the right to water in April 2000? I don't think so. We were not fighting for that. We were fighting for self-determination, for the right to do the things in our own way. And I think that's also very important to look into.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Did you have any questions? Okay. If I may, Marcela, I would like to ask a question. Here in Europe, immigration is a very controversial subject. There are many Europeans who don't want immigrants, and there are many who think that they have a duty and a responsibility to people who come and seek asylum and refuge. So it's a very divisive issue. So in this context, I want to just pick up on the first question about corporate personality. Bechtel was a US citizen. Corporations have citizenship, like people. They also have citizenship. It was a US citizen. And when Bolivia signed a bilateral treaty agreement with the Netherlands, Bechtel changed its citizenship. It came to the Netherlands and it became Dutch citizen now. So when the Bolivian state was trying to defend itself, Bechtel said, we are no longer US citizens, we are now Dutch citizens. So can you say something, how do you see this idea of corporations having citizenship? And should they be treated as citizens and given rights like citizens to migrate? And I think ICCC court has said that corporations do have the right to migrate. So we see two different things here. Human migration, where there is a big controversy people don't want. Corporations migrate. So what do you have to say about this right of corporations to migrate to other countries?
That's why we don't believe in those rules, because those rules apply very well for for corporations, but they don't apply for the people. That's why it's very tricky when we're talking about this framework of rights. And again, who's the one that it's making these rights be enforced? And again, are the friends of these corporations, the protectors of these corporations. And again, they are using these cracks that are in the system in order to talk about, in order to make it work when it's good for them, but not when it's good for the people. And it's very upsetting. It's very upsetting that this is applied for corporations, but it cannot be applied really for the people. Corporations are big. Corporations have money. and they can use these things on their favor. And again, is this is a question that I have asked myself many times. Do we have to fight them under the same the same rules? Perhaps yes. Yes, we do have to fight them there, but also we have to fight them in other places. And what's going on right now with these hearings, I think it's these other places where if we haven't found justice under the normal or legal channels, we might find justice in these other places. Yes.
So, just to clarify that last statement that you made, you said that forums like this, you are here to seek justice. Are you suggesting that by coming to this kind of forum, you are actually seeking justice from the people of Netherlands, because you cannot find justice from the state of Netherlands? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
If I may, I would like to also ask you another question which concerns the protest demonstrations about which you talked earlier in your testimony. Here in Europe, people have a lot of faith in what they understand as a democratic system. And democracy is about elected governments that represent the people. This is the democratic theory. And the governments are supposed to listen to the people that are elected. Now, in Bolivia, you elected your government signed a water treaty which people were not happy with. And you elected a government that would oppose that treaty. And the government opposed it and cancelled the concessions, from what I understood. And after the concessions was cancelled, the state was taken to court, to CICC court, by Bechtel and Agua del Tunari and those companies. So, and in a way that court decided that yes, the court did not have jurisdiction and that Bolivia had to pay compensation. So what does this say? What does this mean to the people of Bolivia? Here you are, you elected a democratic government. The democratic government said we want to cancel this concession, and the concession was cancelled, and then the state was left with a fine of $50 million. What does that? How do you now understand democratic theory or democracy as you have experienced it in Bolivia?
One thing that, when all these things happened, I was 30 years old. And on that time, we learned, like I guess many of you in the world, that what democracy means. And they tell us constantly that democracy is to go every 4 years and put a vote and elect people that will decide for you. That's not democracy. That's what we learned in April 2000. That democracy is something else. And it's when people is being heard. Is when we decide things. It's not when somebody decides for us. It's when we decide. And in April 2000, we decided for ourselves. It wasn't our government that decided to cancel the contract. The government was forced to cancel the contract because we, the people, decided that that contract should be canceled. So we did it. And I think this is very important for people to understand that the things change, or the real change doesn't come from governments or the states. It comes from us when we force them to do the things that we want to do. And that's what happened in April 2000 in Bolivia. That's what I will call democracy, not elect a guy or some people in Congress to decide for me. No, democracy is when we are here, then when we do the things that we want to do on the streets. So first that, and it's, again, it's very hard to explain this because that's something that I learned on the streets, and I don't think I will. My whole notion of democracy has changed since then. It has changed my life, and it has changed the life of many people that were present on that time. So I think we have to deconstruct the notion of democracy and what it means democracy in theory, because in practice can be something else. I would say that. I don't know if I didn't answer what you were asking.
No, thank you. That was a fairly clear answer, I think. Thank you very much. Um, I now ask, yes, did you have?
I have one quick question from an indigenous people's perspective. I mean, there are always conflicts in the world, and there are always, in all of our lives, occasions where there's a need to reconcile and to arbitrate between people who have a dispute. And I'd like to hear just very briefly from you, what are the mechanisms that indigenous communities within Bolivia use to arbitrate for disputes, and how do they differ from these secret courts like ICCID and so on?
There are a lot of conflicts here, and many of these conflicts, especially related to water and land, these conflicts are solved in many ways. But there's something that it's different again from one place to another, but it's under what we call uses and traditions. So there are ways of solve that do not have to pass, not even to local legal system. It doesn't pass through the local legal system, and which is for us is very important because that means that communities will have to sit down with other communities in order to talk about the problems that are affecting everybody, and those things are made through agreements, and are in many cases solved that way. That doesn't mean that sometimes they are only when it's really not it's really difficult to make an agreement, is when we look for an intermediary, or we look for somebody to mediate in these conflicts. But it's mainly that's why it's very, very hard for me to generalize and to explain in detail. But it's basically communities talking to other communities and solving the problems that affect both. And that's why we didn't understand this international court and the World Bank, because it was how three people are going to decide over millions that were affected by the concession of water. And it sounded like a joke that three people will sit down in secret and nobody will be able to go there or to listen what they're talking about. And one of them was who pushed for the privatization in our country. The other one was a representative from the consortium, and the other was our government, and people were left out of that. So it's just how did we let that pass? How could we? We didn't do anything in order to stop that when they would decide to create that structure that it really doesn't work for only for the powerful. Anyway, here it's different, and those stories about these international courts are seriously when we went to explain people that this is what's gonna in early during the early days of the zoo, when we went to explain people that only three of them will decide over this case, people thought that we were kidding or that we were exaggerating or making fun. But it's like that's our system. That's how it works in the real life. And how can we challenge that? Again, if that system doesn't work for the people, we have to create our own systems. And I think this international hearing right now, it's that alternative place where we will be able to be listen, and we will be able to finally make justice.
Participants here to ask their questions or clarifications if they have any. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Perhaps this is too simplistic of a question, but this is a layperson trying to understand this baffling world of economic dealings. But one of the things that confounds me is also that Bechtel pushed for something that has if they are so money-minded, that benefits them less than about 0.17% of their entire income. That I find that completely confusing. So does it then, in your opinion, come down to power play and like you said, getting into the crack in the system to ensure further opportunities, A? And the second one is, from your perspective of ground realities, I find it very inspiring that, like you said, you fought not only for water, but for self-determination. And so for young Bolivians today, do you think there is the similar inclination to fight for self-determination, for conservation of environmental rights, or do you see similar challenges like in Mongolia of employment, of not having the kind of lives they want to lead? So I would also like a little more perspective from your experiences. Yeah.
I think what Bechtel was trying to do is to punish us and to domesticate us and to make a precedent of that what could happen if you oppose to something like this. I think that was mainly that they were punishing us. They were saying, okay, if you do if you do this can happen to you. And they try to do these things all the time, like to say this could happen to you if you don't do what we agreed. So it's a way of domesticating people. It's a way to for this to happen again. I remember that Bechtel did exactly the same. They even created an insurance in the case of Ecuador, because after Bolivia, Bechtel tried to get also a water concession in Guayaquil in Ecuador. And on this time, because they knew that something like that could happen, they made an insurance with somebody. I think it was even the World Bank itself, where if the contract was going to be canceled there, they were still going to get a lot of money. So it's a way for them to yes, to domesticate us and to domesticate our governments and to tell them, this could happen to you. And the other question about the self-determination, I think this is a very important issue, because when we're talking about self-determination, we're talking almost about everything, and it has to do with what we believe it's good for us, not what somebody else believes that it's good for us, but something that we we think, and that's something that can change also over time and can be different from one place to another place. And this is what I think it's very important for other people to understand, because when these international organizations or the World Bank or the policies from the IMF, um, those big financial institutions come to our countries, they come like a recipe, like a one recipe will work for everybody. And the world is not like that. You guys are different from Bolivian people, and Bolivian people, are different from Uruguayan people. And so I think it's important for us also to create our own solutions to the things. One, I think, important lesson of what happened in April 2000 here is that that we were very ready to oppose to something. We said we don't want that, but I don't think we knew for sure what did we wanted and how we can also create alternatives. I think that's the key for many things in the world, is the fact that we can imagine and that we can create alternatives to these other things. So if we don't want an exit court, what do we want? We want discord, right? So I feel like that's a very important part of the struggle everywhere, that we don't just have to be resistant or opposing or saying no, but that we also can have the capacity to create and imagine the things that we want to do and that we think are good for us. I think these two things are very important, that they go together. Because if we are all the time just saying no, 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 and throwing stones to things and creating barricades to things, we don't have the time to imagine and to create alternatives. And I do believe in these times we do need alternatives.
Thank you for that. Was there a question from here? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Marcela, for telling us all of this. And I wanted to tell you also that I think the Cochabamba struggle was one of the first where the privatization of water was fought. And it inspired, I think, many movements all over the world. So that's also maybe what it produces. But I wanted to know, did you ever have, because the fight is causing also lots of damage for yourself, wounded people, even people died. I remember then. I remember the name Hugo Daza was a young boy, one of the demonstrators, and we here we use that name to go to ING to force people to ask who Hugo Daza is. But did you ever hear something from the Dutch side? Did they ever come and apologize or something like that? And if not, shouldn't they be like? I mean, they're co-responsible for what happened there. Shouldn't they be asked to repay the damage that they have done?
There's this big moment, I think, in Africa when they talk about the reparations, or there was, I'm not sure if that continues, but they talk about reparations, right? I don't, we never saw the Dutch government as, I think, no, I will say it in another way. I think the guilt of the Dutch government was overshadowed by the solidarity of the Dutch people. I think we never said really, and I take this opportunity to say thanks to the Dutch people, because they are the ones that help us, and the U.S. people that went in California to demonstrate, and the U.S. people that were in Washington also demonstrating in solidarity with us. I don't know if we we're not expecting an apology from the Dutch government, because I don't think we need that. I don't want to talk on behalf of the whole people that were on the streets. I was just one person on the streets, like everybody else. But I personally do not expect an apology from the Dutch government. It's like expecting things that won't come. But I was not also. I didn't expect the solidarity from the Dutch people, and that we got, and we're happy for that, and we are thankful for that, and we wouldn't have won this other battle for water without you guys. So I really want to express my deep gratitude toward you guys. And this is for the people in in the past, and many young people perhaps that are in the audience. They didn't know that, but that's more gratificant, and it was more it worth more than expecting or getting something from the Dutch government.